Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Jonsereds 70E chainsaw. Customer complaint is that it hasn't run in a while. Well, you're going to see later in the video that I think I know why it hasn't run in a while. I think someone tried to fix it at some point and made a big mistake. Yeah, it's been sitting for a while. The gas is stinky. But I think they made a big mistake and then they let it sit because they couldn't figure it out. So let's follow along here. First thing we're going to do is get that pond scum out of the tank. Then we'll take a look inside and see what we got. So I'm seeing kind of an older filter and a lot of blistered paint. Nothing that's peeling off yet. Just an aged saw. I see an air filter that's half dirty. Let's look inside that cylinder and see what that looks like. You know, this is an older saw. This thing could be roached. Tell you what though, that when I look in there with the flashlight, the thing, it's not perfect, but it's really nice. I would say this has been a lightly used saw over the years. Or maybe it just sat so long with this problem that it's never been used. So I have to come up with a Champion CJ7Y spark plug because the NGK doesn't have the twist off top that this spark plug wire end requires. So we got the air filter off. Let's take the hood off of here and get a closer look. You know, one thing I really like about this saw is that it was built in a time when plastic wasn't much of a thing. That top cover is metal. Everything on here is metal except a few rare pieces. That barbed fitting on the carburetor is plastic. And the air filter is plastic. That's probably about it. So we're just going to clean things up as we go here. Because I'm removing the carburetor, I want to blow all this schmutz away from where it's going to separate. Now that I'm looking at it, the intake manifold is plastic as well. So we're going to need a ball end hex driver to get a shot at turning these bolts out. Couldn't get a straight shot on it. Here's our air filter adapter. And here's our carburetor. Couldn't be easier. There wasn't even a piece of linkage directly connected to it. That throttle just pushes on the throttle linkage pushes on the carburetor. It's not connected to it. So whenever I pull a carb, I like to look at the intake side of the piston skirt. And I tell you what, if you told me that you just put a brand new piston in here, I'd believe you. Because I can see all the machining marks. It looks really good. And that's despite the fact that it's been running this nylon mesh filter, which isn't the smallest micron filter available. So we're going to open up the carb and put a kit in it just for the fact that the gas was so old. You know, I know it's been sitting for a while. And you can see that the fuel pump here is stretched a bit. Probably would have still worked though. It's starting to get that old rubber feel to it though. The micro screen, that looks pretty good despite the fact that the fuel filter looked a little aged. Let's look at the metering diaphragm. It is showing signs of age. But this saw would have ran with this metering diaphragm in here for sure. Now you got to be careful when you pull this one apart because the diaphragm is hooked to the metering lever. But it's pliable yet, kinda. It would have ran with that. We'll put new gaskets and diaphragms in it. gasket first, then hook the metering diaphragm into the metering lever. And I didn't show you me measuring the height of the metering lever, but I did, and it's the right height. And that'll be important a little later on. So now let's put our fuel pump in. A little bit of old gasket on here yet. Just scrape it once with a razor blade. And there's our paper gasket and our cover. Alright, let's take a look inside that fuel tank. We get our fishing pole out here. We're looking for a filter. There we go. So like I said, the thing isn't terrible, but it's old. That'll get replaced. We're going to pull this fuel line out of here. Now, it feels really rubbery and pliable, except on the end where it was pushed onto the carburetor. There, it's really hard. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it could suck air right there. So we'll cut a taper on the end of our new fuel line and push it through the top of the tank. And then we'll grab it with the pliers and pull it through. Once we have it trimmed on the end, we'll put a new filter on it. And then we're going to reinstall the carburetor. We're pushing the high and low speed adjustment screws through the dust cover first. And then we're going to blow the schmutz off the air filter adapter and run the bolts through the carburetor and tighten it down. Again, the ball end driver is going to make this possible. Alright, now we can hook up our fuel line. We're going to route it underneath the kill switch wire and then push it onto the barbed fitting. Now we can check our throttle linkage. That works right. Nothing is interfering with the fuel line. Choke is working fine. We found the right spark plug. We'll remove the cap off the top. We'll get that threaded into place. And push our spark plug boot on. And we'll get the top cover back down into place. You got to get the choke linkage lined up. There's a grommet that goes in the slot on the cover. That looks good. Then there's 3 screws with flat washers. Now let's take a look at this air filter. It's a nylon mesh style, so I can blow it out, reuse it. Yeah, it's plenty dirty. I mean, if you look at it close, it's probably 50% blocked. But this thing doesn't fit on the air filter adapter very good. That's because there's a rubber grommet that's missing. I don't know how long it's been missing because there was no dirt in the throat. So I don't know if it got lost last time someone tried to fix this. Not sure. We're going to put an O-ring on there to seal it up. Then we'll just clean some schmutz off of this air filter cover. And run our cover screw back down. And I'm turning and turning and turning on this screw. And finally the knob came off. Well, the knob's got a crack in it. I don't know if it cracked when I took it off of there. I'm not sure. But I want to keep moving on with this repair, so I just found a bolt the right length. We'll run it down in there and fire the saw up. Tighten it down by hand. That looks good. Let's dump some fuel in here. Check the bar oil. Bar oil is going to be good. And then we'll try and fire this thing up. Stop switch is in the on position. Choke. I probably should have set the throttle lock, but I didn't. You can find out here in a second that don't matter. I don't like having to drop start saws like this. But this thing was pulling really hard. I think it was just dry. So it never even popped. I don't think it's getting any fuel. We'll take a closer look here and find out. And there's no fuel in the throat of the carburetor. And there's no fuel on the spark plug. So what reasons might there be for there not being fuel there? Well, you could have a plugged up fuel filter, or a collapsing fuel line, or a stiff metering diaphragm. Well, we replaced all them things, so why isn't it getting fuel? We'll dump a little fuel in there and see what it does. So now it's popping. We're going to hold the throttle wide open and see what it does. So for something that just had a carb rebuild, that was terrible. I went out and tried to cut with it, and it just, you know, the lower half of the RPM range, it was okay. Nothing on top at all. And here's why. I'm showing you where the passage is. Here's the impulse hole. And there's the mark in the gasket where the passage on the intake manifold lives. And you can see the gasket goes through the center of the passage. There's a huge air leak in that impulse passage, because someone put a gasket on there that was too small to cover all of that. You can see the proper gasket, how much more meat there is off on the side, and that's what's needed to block off that, or not block it off, but to seal that passage completely. So the fact that when I was just pulling the cord and it wasn't getting any fuel and it wouldn't start, at that speed, there wasn't enough pulse to run the pump. But it turns out there was enough speed to kind of run the pump when the engine was running fast, you know. So that's all I'm going to have for you on the Jonsereds 70E that not only needed a fuel system refresh, but needed a new carburetor gasket. Thanks for watching. Later.